Welcome to Speak Life with Dr. Amy Chai. Information for your best life. Now, here's Amy Chai.
Hi there. I'm Dr. Amy Chai, and you're watching Speak Life New Haven. And today's episode is about viruses. And today I'd like to wish a very, very special happy birthday to our favorite virus, COVID-19. Can you believe it's been 3 whole years since we started with this crazy, insane virus? But it has been. And there's been a lot of information out there about the virus. Some of it's good information, some of it's bad information. But the problem that I see is that nobody really knows what to believe about the viruses. And I think partly that's the fault of the medical establishment. We didn't communicate well. It's partly the fault of the CDC. The CDC didn't communicate well. And then it became a huge, ridiculous political football. So, how do we know what to believe about COVID-19? Well, today I'm going to talk to you about viruses, specifically COVID-19, how COVID-19 replicates, and a little bit about mRNA and what that is. And a lot of times people will ask me, well, Dr. Chai, what's your references? What gives you the authority to talk about this topic? Well, everything I'm going to say today is completely not controversial at all. And if you would take a biology text, and I have an excellent biology text here. This book is called Campbell's Biology. It's a very thick textbook, and it's upside down, isn't it? Yeah. I used this textbook when I was homeschooling to teach my kids biology back in 9th grade. It is a very popular textbook to use for AP biology in a lot of high schools. So if your kid has a textbook at home, you can certainly get it out and compare everything that I'm going to say to the textbook that you have at home. And nothing in this has really changed for at least the past 40 or 50 years. So everything is completely up and up. It's completely well known, and it's pretty much settled science. So that's really good news. And here we go. We're going to try to describe to you a little bit about viruses. Okay. So the first thing I want to do when I talk about viruses is I think I have to tell you a little bit about something called mRNA. Now, you've heard a lot about mRNA because of the COVID vaccines use mRNA in them. But what is mRNA and how does it differ from DNA? And what does that have to do with viruses? Well, get ready for a little bit of a ride. And we're going to start first by talking about DNA. So I've gotten out a zipper. And this is just an ordinary zipper like you would sew into the back of a dress or a shirt. And it represents DNA, which is deoxyribonucleic acid. The fabric here, the black fabric here, represents the ribose chain. And the zipper cogs that go together represent the nucleotides that bind together. And you may have heard of those: adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine. And those match up and cause the DNA strands to zip up together, just like a zipper, okay? But this big, giant piece of DNA, double-stranded, it's really big. And how do you fit it into, that little teeny nucleus of the cell? Well, you twist it and you twist it and you super twist it until it's like super coiled and twist it up really small, like this. And this gets packaged inside something called the nucleus. And the nucleus, as I'm sure you remember from school, is the center part of the cell where the DNA lives. So, what happens to the DNA inside the nucleus? Well, that's where mRNA comes in. Now, I want you to know that there are probably about 7 different types of RNA. But today we're only going to talk about one type of RNA, and that's called messenger RNA. As the name implies, messenger RNA is the type of RNA that takes a message from the DNA out to the rest of the cell to give instructions on how to build the cell, how to make enzymes, how to make the cell functions and metabolisms and divisions and all of those things that a cell needs to do. So, as you can see, the RNA is very different from the DNA. And you can't see it that well under this camera, but this piece of zipper is only 1/2. It doesn't have the other piece. It doesn't have another side of the zipper. And the prongs here of the zipper are actually gold, and these are silver. And the fabric is white, and this is black. And that's to illustrate the fact that RNA is ribonucleic acid, not deoxyribonucleic acid. So the backbone of RNA is different from the backbone of DNA. It's a different type of molecule. And it's a different color on the prongs because there is a different type of substance called uracil that replaces one of the nucleotides from the DNA to the RNA. So it's very important to know that RNA and DNA are very different types of molecules. So what happens? Inside of your nucleus, your DNA actually loosens up. It just loosens up a little part. And it literally unzips, just like a zipper. It unzips just like this. And then what happens is a little piece of matching RNA goes inside that matches just like it would zip up to the other piece. And this piece is called mRNA. And it goes outside of the nucleus. And this is the instructions from the DNA to build something that's it's a protein, okay? But once it gets outside of the nucleus, it gets chopped up into little pieces. So what you actually see is just a small piece of RNA, a small piece of messenger RNA outside the nucleus, and it's going to code for different amino acids. I'm going to show you each 3 prongs codes for a different amino acid. I'm putting a black one here, a pink one here, a purple one here, a yellow one here, and then a green one here. And so what it does is it makes a protein. And so as soon as the mRNA is done making this protein that I have here, then the mRNA gets eaten up by something called RNase, which is an enzyme that eliminates mRNA in your body. So this piece of mRNA inside your cell, well, it only lasts about 5 minutes, and then it's all eaten up by enzymes, okay? And what you have left is a protein, okay? Now, this protein, if you're talking about the coronavirus, it could be one of 24 different proteins. because the coronavirus codes for 24 different proteins. And one of those proteins is called the spike protein. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that when we describe how a virus reproduces. If you have any questions about what's the difference between RNA and DNA, you can email me at hotstonesoup@gmail.com, and I'll try to answer you on another show, okay? But I try to explain it in a way that's easily illustrated. So let's talk about viruses. Now, how does a virus infect a cell? Okay. So this little jar represents a cell. And inside the cell, it has a nucleus like this, okay? And this is actually very much like a real cell because real cells are mostly water. They're mushy, gushy. They're not very solid. They move around a lot. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how the RNA virus, COVID virus, will infect this cell, okay? So, I know this looks exactly like water with green food coloring in it, but let's just pretend like this water is the RNA from COVID-19 virus, okay? Let's just pretend that. So remember when we were talking about DNA, and each one codes for a protein. Now the COVID-19 virus makes not just one protein, not just two proteins, but it actually makes 24 different proteins. And the type of genetic material that it has inside of the virus particle is RNA. So what you have is single-stranded RNA that's enough to code for 24 different proteins. So if we're going to say that this green water is virus RNA from the COVID virus, we'd say that each line on this little syringe is going to represent one protein. So what we want to do is we want to count up 24 lines. Each one is going to represent one protein, or the amount of RNA that it takes to make one protein. So let's just do this here. I hope I don't spill any because that would be a big mess with all this green food coloring. Careful, careful, careful. Okay. So what the virus does is it comes up to the cell and it sticks itself right onto the surface of the cell, just exactly like this, okay? And then it injects its RNA into the cell. And so it has enough RNA for 24 proteins. That's a lot of RNA, isn't it? Okay. So now you can see this is a cell that has a lot of RNA inside of it. And that's how the virus gets its genetic material into the cell. Now, let's compare that with how the COVID vaccine gets mRNA into the cell. Now, the COVID vaccine codes for one protein. So the mRNA protein that it has will only be one protein on this syringe. And let's draw it up here. We'll get it to the first line here. It's hard to get exactly one. Might be a little more than one here. Okay. And let's get us a little bit of a nucleus for this next cell. Now, this is a cell that's going to encounter an mRNA vaccine liposome, okay? What happens with that is it has enough mRNA to make one protein. So it goes to the cell and it puts just one piece of mRNA into the cell. Okay. So I hope you can see this little blob here of green, which is the single piece of mRNA. It's a very small piece of mRNA. And that would be what you would get if you put enough for a single gene inside your cell from the vaccine. Now, this is the natural infection. And as you can see, it has a lot of mRNA in it. It has enough mRNA to make 24 proteins. So that's at least 24 times as much RNA that goes into the cell from one single virus as compared to the vaccine. So how does the virus reproduce when it gets inside the cell? Well, it takes over the cellular material of the cell and it starts multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. And this little bag of beads here is going to represent a cell that's just filled with brand new baby viruses, okay? So it makes more and more and more baby viruses. And then what happens is there's so many baby viruses inside that it kind of breaks the cell. And okay, this is a knife, but you get the idea. And then all of these baby viruses just come like pouring out of the cell. Okay. And that's how viruses reproduce. First, the viral genetic material goes inside the cell. And in this case, it's RNA from the COVID-19 virus that codes for 24 proteins. It takes over the machinery of the cell and reproduces a bunch of baby viruses until the cell explodes and dies. And then all those other viruses go out swimming around in the body to find new cells to infect. And they estimate that it's about 10 billion cells are infected. There's a viral load they expect of about 10 billion viruses in your average COVID infection, or 10 to the 10th power. And that's a lot of viruses. Excuse me. So what kind of cells get the virus? Well, of course, lung cells, heart cells, a lot of different cells have something called the ACE2 receptor, and that's what the spike protein goes onto. So how does our body kill the virus? Okay. So, oh, look, isn't this wonderful? These are supposed to be green, but I shouldn't have put green on a green screen because now it's kind of dumb. But these are supposed to be cells in your body. One cell has no infection, and the other cell is filled with COVID viruses. So the virus that has cells in it, okay, from the virus will chop up little bits of the virus and put it on the outside of the cell surface so that it can be recognized. This is like a signal that says, please, please kill me, because I've been infected with an invader. And cells also do this with cancer. If they have cancer, they'll put bits of cancer on this so that the immune system will kill those cells. There's also, this cell is not infected with a virus, and it has these little flags. These little flags, they're not really flags. They're just little protein molecules that say, hi, we're on the same team. Don't hurt me, don't hurt me. They're called self molecules, or MHC complex molecules. So you can see this B cell and this T cell. These are both immune cells. They also have these little flags that say, hey, we're on the same team. So this T cell and this B cell, they're not going to attack this cell at all, because this cell shows that it has those little markers that say, hi, I'm safe, I'm you. You and me are from the same body, so don't hurt me, okay? But this infected cell with viruses on it, inside of it, knows that this cell has to die. So this cell wants to alert the body to destroy it. And it's like it wants to destroy itself to preserve the rest of the body. So it chops up little bits of the COVID virus, and it puts them on top here so that these cells can recognize it. And here I have a T cell, which is a natural killer cell. And what it does is it recognizes the self that's infected right here. This little thing here means, help, I'm infected. And this T cell comes and it stabs it to death. It like kills this cell and the cell dies, okay? And there's also B cells that put out these floating type of immune complexes that'll stick all over them and make them clump together. So this is how the cell that's infected is going to get the immune system revved up, and a lot of immune inflammation and inflammatory, everywhere in the body, the heart, the myocytes, inside the blood vessels where the blood clots, inside the lung where the lung tissue is. This goes on from the natural infection. And but the difference between this and the vaccine is that the vaccine only produces one protein, just the spike protein. But the natural infection produces 24 proteins, and including the spike protein. So which do you think would make more inflammation and would cause these cells to go crazier? One protein or 24 proteins? Yeah, that's right. 24 proteins is going to make more inflammation than one protein. And that's why they chose to only put one protein in to the vaccine. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit more is the COVID vaccine. And I know that everybody's very concerned about whether or not the COVID vaccine is safe. But just to reiterate, the RNA, the mRNA that comes from the vaccine is very small, and it only codes for one protein. The mRNA that comes from the virus is very large, and it codes for 24 proteins. Excuse me. So there will be less inflammation from only the one protein very typically. So what I'd like to do is I would like to tell you a little bit more about the COVID vaccine and what we know about the COVID vaccine. But the first myth that I want to dispel is the COVID vaccine cannot change your DNA. And why is that? It's because DNA is a very, very different molecule from RNA. And the human body does not have a way to turn RNA into DNA. It's not possible for the human body to turn RNA into DNA. There is a retrovirus called HIV, which has something called reverse transcriptase. And that can turn RNA into DNA, and it has. That's why 10% of the DNA in your body is actually from old viruses that your ancestors caught many, many years ago, maybe 1,000 years ago, maybe even 2,000 years ago. So about 10% of your DNA today is already from viruses, most likely from retroviruses or from DNA viruses, not RNA viruses. But the COVID vaccine cannot turn into DNA, and the COVID virus cannot turn into DNA because our bodies do not contain reverse transcriptase, and neither does COVID-19. So that's a very important myth to dispel. There's no possible way for your body to turn mRNA into DNA ever. Now, it can happen in a lab, and they have done it in a lab, but that's a lab experiment. It's not something that would ever actually happen in your own body. And the other thing is that about 10% of cancers are caused by viral infections. Like one example would be HPV. And that's why we know that it's much, much safer to get a vaccine for a virus, such as the HPV vaccine, because that'll prevent you from getting cancer, such as cervical cancer. And that is a very important step because a lot of viral infections do cause cancer. So eliminating 10% of cancers would be great if we could have vaccines for a lot more viruses. Then we could have the body fight the virus off, and we wouldn't have the problem with the virus causing cancer in the human body. But most important to remember is the first myth to dispel is that the COVID-19 vaccine cannot change your DNA because it's not possible. And all the information and data you need is in a simple high school biology book. It's old science, it's not new science. And that's the sort of thing that you need to listen to and believe. So we're going to talk a little bit more about myocarditis and safety of the vaccine. And we're going to do that next time on Speak Life, New Haven. So don't forget, speak life into someone's world today.
Tune in next time for Speak Life with Dr. Amy Chai at ctpolitics.tv.